Years ago, long before anyone on Earth talked openly about aliens, a human soldier stood on a broken battlefield far from home. The sky above that planet burned with strange colors, and the ground shook with every explosion. It was not a place meant for humans, yet humans were there, fighting alongside alien allies against a common enemy. The soldier had been sent as part of a small unit, trained to survive in places where survival seemed impossible. He was not a hero by choice. He was just someone who followed orders, learned quickly, and tried to keep the people around him alive. The armor he wore was scratched and damaged, and the air inside his helmet smelled of smoke and metal. Every step felt heavy, not only because of gravity, but because of fear. Fear was always there, quiet but strong. The battle had already gone on for hours. Alien ships clashed in the sky, sending fire raining down on the surface. Energy weapons flashed like lightning. Screams echoed across open ground, some human, some not. The soldier moved carefully through the ruins of what once might have been a city. Tall structures lay broken like fallen giants. Nothing felt solid anymore. His unit had been scattered. Communications were down. He did not know who was still alive. He only knew one thing. He had to keep moving. Standing still meant death. As he crossed a narrow stretch of open ground, an explosion knocked him off his feet. His vision blurred, and his ears rang. Dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. He rolled onto his side, forcing himself up despite the pain. That was when he saw movement near a collapsed wall. At first, he thought it was another enemy. His hand tightened around his weapon. Then he noticed the armor. It was alien, sleek, and dark, marked with symbols he did not understand. The figure was on the ground, struggling to move. The soldier hesitated. Training told him to prioritize his own safety. He could leave. No one would know. No one would blame him. The battlefield was full of bodies already. But something made him step closer. The alien figure was badly injured. One arm hung uselessly, and dark blood soaked the ground beneath her. Her breathing was uneven, each breath a clear effort. Her helmet was cracked, revealing part of her face. Her eyes, wide and sharp, locked onto him with fear and disbelief. She tried to raise a weapon, but failed. Her strength was gone. The soldier raised his hand slightly, showing he was not attacking. He did not speak her language, and she did not speak his. Words would not help here. Only actions mattered. Another explosion rocked the area. Debris fell around them. Time was running out. He could hear enemy units moving closer. Their voices were harsh and mechanical, echoing through the ruins. If they found her, she would be executed without mercy. If they found him, the same fate awaited. The soldier made a decision. He grabbed her under the uninjured arm and pulled her up. She cried out softly, her body tense with pain. She was lighter than he expected, but still heavy enough to slow him down. Every step was a risk. They moved through smoke and fire, stumbling over broken stone and twisted metal. Enemy fire struck the ground nearby, sending sparks into the air. The soldier kept going, his heart pounding, his muscles screaming. He did not think about why he was doing this. He just knew he could not leave her there. They reached a partially intact structure, its walls thick enough to offer some cover. Inside, it was dark and quiet compared to the chaos outside. The soldier lowered her gently to the ground. She watched him closely, her eyes never leaving his face. There was confusion there, and pain, but also something else. Trust slowly forming. He checked her wounds as best he could. He was no medic, but he had basic training. He applied pressure where he could, using pieces of his own gear to slow the bleeding. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. He could leave now. He had done more than enough. Instead, he stayed. For what felt like hours, he guarded that broken room. Enemy patrols passed nearby, but none came inside. The battle outside slowly shifted. The sounds changed, becoming distant. Finally, silence fell, heavy and uncertain. Rescue units arrived later, both human and alien. Medics rushed in, surprised to see a human standing over an injured alien officer. They moved quickly, lifting her onto a stretcher. Before she was taken away, her eyes met his one last time. She lifted her hand slightly, touching her chest, then pointed at him. A simple gesture, but full of meaning. He nodded, unsure why. Then she was gone. The war ended not long after that battle. Treaties were signed. Alliances faded into history. The soldier returned to Earth without medals or speeches. No one asked about the alien he saved. No reports mentioned it. To the universe, it was just another small moment lost in a massive conflict. Life moved on. He took a normal job. He lived in a small place. Some nights, he dreamed of fire-filled skies and strange stars. Other nights, he dreamed of those sharp alien eyes looking at him through pain and smoke. Years passed. The memory faded, becoming just another story he told himself when he could not sleep. He never imagined it mattered. He never imagined that somewhere far beyond Earth, someone remembered him. Because on that battlefield, he did not save an alien queen. He just saved a life. And he walked away, believing that was the end of it. The years after the war passed quietly. The human soldier settled into a life that looked ordinary from the outside. He worked regular hours, paid his bills, and kept mostly to himself. People around him knew nothing about distant planets or alien battlefields. To them, he was just another face in the crowd. And that was how he wanted it. He did not talk about the war. Not because it was a secret, but because it felt unreal now, like something that belonged to another version of himself. The sounds, the smells, the fear, all of it lived somewhere deep in his mind. Most days, he did not think about it at all. Only sometimes, when he looked up at the night sky, did a strange feeling settle in his chest. On one normal morning, everything changed. News alerts filled every screen across Earth. Massive shapes had appeared in orbit, unlike any human-made ships. They did not attack. They did not move aggressively. They simply arrived and waited. Governments rushed into emergency meetings. Cities slowed as people stayed indoors, watching and guessing. The human watched the broadcasts from his small living space. He felt a familiar tension in his body, the kind that only came from experience. These were not enemy ships. He could tell by their formation, by how calm they were. Still, fear spread quickly among the population. Hours later, an official announcement was made. A peaceful alien delegation had come to Earth. They requested a formal meeting. But what caught everyone's attention was one strange detail. They had asked for a specific human, not a leader, not a general, just a name. When officials finally tracked him down, the human thought it was a mistake. People in dark suits arrived at his door, serious and quiet. They checked his identity again and again. They asked about his past service, about where he had been during the war. He answered honestly, still confused. He was taken to a secure location, briefed as little as possible, and told that an alien leader wished to see him in person. No one explained why. No one could dot as he was transported. His thoughts raced. He searched his memory for any reason this could be happening. He had not spoken to aliens since the war. He had not done anything important. He was just a soldier who followed orders. The meeting place was large, clean, and heavily guarded. Human officials stood in lines, tense and alert. At the center of the room stood a raised platform, empty for now, Then the doors opened. The alien delegation entered with quiet confidence. Their movements were smooth, controlled. At their center walked a tall figure wearing elegant armor, polished and marked with symbols of rank. Her presence filled the room without her saying a word. The human felt it immediately. A strange pull in his chest. A sense that he had seen this before, somewhere else, long ago. She stopped a few steps away from him. Her eyes focused only on his face. The room fell silent. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she did. Her voice was calm, clear, and translated smoothly into human language. "Do you remember me, human?" The words hit him harder than any explosion ever had. He stared at her, his mind racing. He searched her face, her eyes, her posture. Something felt familiar. The time had changed her. The broken, bleeding figure from the battlefield was now powerful, composed, and unmistakably important. "I'm sorry," he said honestly. "I don't think I do." There was no anger in her expression, only understanding. "Years ago," she continued, "on a battlefield far from this world, you carried me from the edge of death. You stayed when you could have left. You guarded me when the fighting still raged." His breath caught. The memory rushed back with sudden clarity. Smoke, fire, sharp eyes filled with pain. A broken wall. A silent room. "You were injured," he said slowly. "I didn't know who you were." A faint smile touched her lips. That is why it mattered. Murmurs spread through the room. Human officials exchanged shocked looks. The realization spread quickly. The alien before them was not just a visitor. She was the queen. The human felt his legs weaken slightly. He had saved a life without knowing its weight. Now that weight stood before him, wrapped in authority and history. "I never expected this," he said quietly. "I thought it was just one moment." "In my people's history," she replied. "That moment changed everything." She spoke of the chaos after that battle, of how her survival stabilized her world, of how her leadership prevented further wars. None of it sounded real to him. It felt too large, too distant. He shook his head slightly. "I didn't do it for rewards or recognition." "I know," she said. "That is why I came." She explained that in her culture, a life saved creates a bond that cannot be ignored. A debt not of gold or power, but of honor. For years, she had searched for him. Records were incomplete. The war had scattered identities. Only recently had Earth shared enough data for her to find him. She looked around the room, then back at him. "I did not come to demand," she said. "I came to acknowledge." The room was silent again. Cameras captured every second. Across Earth, millions watched as a queen bowed her head slightly to a human who still did not feel worthy of standing there. He did not know what to do. He stood still, heart pounding, wishing he were anywhere else. Yet a strange calm settled over him. This was not danger. This was closure. "I don't see myself as someone special," he said at last. "I just did what felt right." "That," she replied, "is what made you special." The meeting ended without drama. No demands. No threats. Only words spoken honestly. As he was escorted away, the human felt the weight of something new settling into his life. The past had not stayed buried. It had found him. And he sensed that this reunion was only the beginning of a story far bigger than either of them had planned. After the meeting, nothing felt normal anymore. The human was taken to a quiet room away from cameras and officials. The walls were plain, the lights soft, yet his mind would not slow down. What he had just heard kept repeating in his head. A queen, a life debt. A moment he barely remembered had shaped an entire world. He sat alone for a while, hands resting on his knees, staring at the floor. He did not feel proud, He felt small, not in a weak way, but in a human way. How could one choice, made in fear and smoke, matter so much years later? The door opened quietly. The alien queen entered without guards this time. Her posture was relaxed, no armor, no symbols of power. Just her, standing there as a person, not a ruler. I wanted to speak without the room watching us, she said gently. He nodded. I'm still trying to understand all of this. That is fair, she replied, taking a seat across from him. I will tell you what happened after you left. Not as a queen, but as the one you carried from that battlefield. She looked down for a moment, then began. After the battle, she said, her condition had been worse than anyone realized. The wound she suffered would have ended her life within minutes if help had not come. Her guards had been killed. Communications were lost. Her enemies believed she was already gone. When I woke later, she said, I was told a human soldier stayed with me while the battle still burned around us. The human listened quietly. He remembered fragments. The pressure of holding a wound. The sound of distant fighting. He remembered thinking he would likely die there too. She explained how her survival changed everything. Her world had been on the edge of collapse. Without her, rival factions would have torn the empire apart. The war would have spread further, taking millions more lives. I was young then, she said. Unproven. Many doubted me. When I lived, they saw it as fate choosing a path. He shook his head slowly. I never saw any of that. I just saw someone bleeding. That is why it mattered, she said again. She told him that after the war, she searched for him quietly. Records were damaged. Human forces rotated soldiers often. Many names were lost or classified. She did not want attention. She wanted truth. For years, she said, I wondered if you had survived, if the one who saved me had lived a full life or fallen later in another fight. He swallowed. I almost didn't make it back myself. They sat in silence for a moment. There was no tension. Only shared memory. Then she asked him something unexpected. Do you regret staying? He looked up surprised. No, he said without hesitation. I never have. She closed her eyes briefly, as if relieved. She then showed him recordings. Old battle footage from her side. The view was different. He saw himself from afar, dragging her through smoke, shielding her body with his own when explosions struck nearby. He did not recognize the person on the screen. That doesn't feel like me, he said quietly. It was you, she replied. Fear and courage at the same time. She explained that in her culture, honor is tied to memory. Forgetting a life debt is seen as losing one's identity. That was why she came in person. Not to repay him with power, but to face him and speak the truth. You gave without knowing, she said. That is rare. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. Where I come from, people like me don't expect thanks. We just hope things turn out okay. They did, she said. Because of you. As the conversation continued, the human began to see the situation differently. This was not about him being important. It was about connection. Two lives crossing in chaos and meeting again in peace. He asked her what she wanted now. Understanding, she said. And honesty? From you. He thought for a moment. I don't want to be treated like a symbol. Or a hero. I'm not built for that. She nodded. Then we understand each other. Later that day, human officials met with him privately. They asked questions, careful and polite. Did he feel threatened? Did he feel pressured? Did he want protection? He answered calmly. She didn't come to take anything. She came to give closure. That surprised them. As night fell, he was allowed to step outside briefly. The alien ships still hovered silently in orbit, visible like stars that did not belong. He looked up at them, remembering another sky long ago, filled with fire. He finally understood something that had bothered him for years. Why that moment stayed with him. Why those eyes haunted his dreams. Not it was not trauma alone, not it was unfinished truth. Behind him, the Queen joined him, looking up at Earth's sky for the first time from the ground. "This world feels fragile," she said. "It is," he replied. "But it's also stubborn." She smiled slightly. They stood there quietly, two survivors from opposite ends of the universe, connected by a choice made without thought of reward. And in that moment, the human realized the story was no longer about the past. It was about what comes next. The next day felt heavier than the ones before it. Word of the meeting had spread everywhere. People across Earth talked about the human who once saved an alien queen without knowing who she was. Some called it destiny. Others called it luck. The human himself felt none of that. He felt pressure. He woke early, unable to sleep. His small room felt different now, like it no longer belonged to him. Guards waited outside, not threatening, but constant. Every step he took was watched. Every word he said felt recorded, even when no one was nearby. He missed his old life already. Later that morning, he was called into another meeting. This one was larger. Human leaders sat on one side of the room. Alien representatives stood on the other. The Queen sat between them, calm and still, like a quiet center holding everything together. The human took a seat at the far end, unsure why he needed to be there at all. The discussion began slowly. It was not about war or threats. It was about the future, trade routes, shared knowledge, peace agreements, words that sounded clean and careful. But beneath them, tension flowed like an unseen current. Then the topic shifted. One of the alien representatives spoke about honor and obligation, about how a life debt, once declared publicly, carried weight beyond personal feeling. It shaped decisions. It influenced politics. It created responsibility. The human felt his chest tighten. He looked at the Queen, who met his eyes briefly. There was no command in her gaze, only honesty. A human official cleared their throat and spoke next. They talked about safety, about the human being a civilian now, about how too much attention could endanger him. That part was true. The room filled with careful arguments. Each side spoke respectfully, yet firmly. The human listened quietly, feeling like an object being discussed instead of a person. Finally, the Queen raised her hand. The room fell silent instantly. "I did not come to claim him," she said. "I came to honor him." She turned slightly, facing the human directly. "But honor has consequences," she continued, "whether we wish it or not." She explained that her people would never forget what he had done. Stories of the battle were already taught in their history records. His image, carrying her through fire, had become a symbol of unexpected courage. The human felt uncomfortable hearing this. "That shouldn't define my whole life," he said softly, though the room was large enough for everyone to hear. "And it will not," she replied, "unless you allow it." All eyes turned to him. For the first time since this began, he realized something important. He was not trapped. He was being asked. "What exactly are you offering?" he asked carefully. "And what would it cost me?" The Queen answered without hesitation. "Nothing that takes away who you are," she said. "I would ask you to serve as a bridge. Not a soldier, not a ruler, a witness, a voice that reminds both sides of the cost of war." The idea settled slowly in his mind. Human leaders exchanged glances. This was not what they expected. No forced position, no political leash. "But if he refuses," one of them asked, "what then?" "Then the debt remains acknowledged," the Queen said, "and nothing more is asked." The human breathed out slowly. The weight eased slightly, but the decision still felt massive. The meeting ended without a final answer. He was given time. Real time. Not hours, but days. The alien fleet would remain in orbit until he chose. That afternoon, he was allowed to walk outside again, this time in a secured, open area. The sky was clear. The ships above moved slowly, silent and patient. He thought about his old routine. Quiet mornings. Simple work. Being unnoticed. He thought about how peaceful that life had been, even if it felt empty sometimes. Then he thought about the battlefield. About how he had acted without thinking, because leaving had felt wrong. The Queen joined him again later, this time without ceremony. She stood beside him, looking at the ground, then the sky. "I do not want to trap you in my world," she said. "I know what it is like to be shaped by expectations." He nodded. "Where I come from, people don't expect their lives to matter beyond their own circle. Yet sometimes they do," she said gently. He asked her something that had been bothering him. "If someone else had saved you," he said, "would this still be happening?" She considered the question carefully. "Perhaps," she said, "but it was you. And that matters because of how you see yourself." He frowned. "I don't see myself as special." "Exactly," she said. "That is why I trust you." They talked for a long time. About leadership. About guilt. About surviving when others did not. She spoke of the loneliness of power. He spoke of the quiet weight carried by ordinary people who never speak of their hardest moments. By the time evening came, he felt calmer than he had in days. That night, alone again, he made his decision. The next morning, he returned to the chamber. The atmosphere felt different, expectant, still. He stood before both sides, hands relaxed at his sides. "I won't pretend I understand politics," he said simply. "And I don't want to be a symbol people argue over." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But I know what it means to stand between danger and someone who can't protect themselves. If my presence can help prevent future battles, even in a small way, then maybe that choice I made years ago doesn't end on that battlefield." The Queen listened closely, her expression steady. "I'll do it," he said, "but on my terms. I stay human. I speak honestly. And if this ever turns into something that harms people, I walk away." A silence followed. Then the Queen stood. "Accepted," she said. There was no applause, no dramatic reaction, just a quiet understanding that something had shifted. Later, as the meeting ended and plans began forming slowly, the human felt something unfamiliar, but not unpleasant. Purpose, not forced, not demanded, chosen. And for the first time since the war, he felt that the past had finally found a place where it belonged. The days that followed moved slowly, but nothing felt the same anymore. The decision had been made, yet its shape was still unclear. The human did not suddenly become famous in the way people expected. There were no grand celebrations, no constant speeches. Instead, there were quiet meetings, careful conversations, and long pauses where everyone tried to understand what this new path really meant. He stayed mostly out of public view. That was by design. Both human leaders and alien representatives agreed that turning him into a public figure too quickly would only create fear and misunderstanding. So his role began quietly, almost invisibly. At first, he simply listened. He sat in rooms where humans and aliens spoke through translators, each side careful with every word. He noticed how easily meaning could be lost, even when intentions were good. A phrase that sounded respectful to one side could feel cold to the other. A pause meant patience in one culture and doubt in another. When asked to speak, he did not use polished words. He spoke the way he always had. "When I was on that battlefield," he said during one session, "nobody cared where someone came from. We only cared who was bleeding and who could still stand." The room went quiet. That simple truth carried more weight than any formal statement. The Queen watched these moments closely. She never interrupted him. She never corrected him. When disagreements rose, she allowed him to finish before speaking herself. Slowly, people began to notice something important. He did not represent Earth. He did not represent her empire. He represented consequence. Outside those rooms, life continued. People went to work. Children went to school. The alien ships still hovered in the sky, no longer frightening, just present. Over time, fear softened into curiosity. The human was allowed to return home between meetings. His place was still small, still quiet, but now it felt like a place of rest rather than escape. Sometimes he sat by the window at night, watching the stars, wondering how many lives were unfolding beyond what human eyes could see. One evening, there was a knock at his door. It was the Queen. No guards, no announcement. Just her. "I hope this is not unwelcome," she said. He shook his head. "You're fine." They sat across from each other in the simple room. The contrast between them was almost strange now. A ruler of worlds sitting on a plain chair, hands resting calmly in her lap. "This place feels honest," she said, looking around. "Nothing here pretends to be more than it is." "That's kind of how I live," he replied. She smiled softly. They spoke about small things that night, about Earth's weather, about food, about how strange silence could feel after years of constant responsibility. For the first time, he saw her laugh. Not as a queen, but as someone relieved to be understood without effort. "I carry many titles," she said at one point, "but few people speak to me without fear." He met her eyes. "On that battlefield, I didn't know who you were. Maybe that helped." "It did," she said quietly. As weeks passed, his role became clearer. He traveled occasionally, not as a diplomat, but as an observer. He visited joint research centers, human hospitals that studied alien medicine, alien ships where human engineers worked side by side with beings who once felt like myths. Everywhere he went, he reminded people of one thing. "War isn't abstract," he said. "It's someone choosing whether to walk away or stay." That message spread slowly, but it stayed. The Queen eventually announced her departure. Her fleet would leave Earth's orbit, not as a goodbye, but as a sign of trust. Communication channels would remain open. Cooperation would continue. Before she left, there was one final gathering. Smaller this time. No cameras. Just those who had been directly involved. She stood before him and bowed her head again, deeper than before. "My people will remember you," she said, not as a symbol, but as a reminder that strength can look ordinary. He felt uncomfortable, as always, but also grateful. "I don't want statues," he said, "or stories that make things sound cleaner than they are." She nodded. "Then we will remember the truth." As her ships departed, the sky slowly returned to normal. The world breathed out. Life adjusted. Months later, the human returned to something close to his old routine. He still worked, still lived simply. But now, sometimes, messages arrived, questions, requests for perspective. He answered when he felt it mattered. He was never forced. That was the most important part. One quiet evening, he stood outside, watching the stars again. They no longer felt distant. They felt connected. He thought about that younger version of himself on the battlefield, tired, afraid, acting without thinking. He understood something now that he had not then. That moment did not make him important. It made him responsible. Not forever. Not to everyone. Just enough. And that was more than enough for one human life. Somewhere far beyond Earth, an alien queen ruled with the memory of a human who chose to stay. And on Earth, that human lived quietly, knowing that even the smallest choice could echo farther than anyone ever expects.